You know, what are we going to rally the troops? Are we going to hold each other accountable? Are we going to invest more? Are we going to, whatever it is, find a way to get ourselves in position to not let things like this happen?
What happened was a blowout by a score that ranks as one of the worst Temple football has ever seen. I'm Jake Gable reporting live outside the practice facility at Edberg Olson, and I'll talk about how Temple ended up on the wrong side of the history books.
But there is some good news. There is another game just days away, and it's at home.
We'll also take a look into the eye of the Golden Hurricane. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now. Hello and welcome into a brand new edition of Inside the Nest. She's Emilie Cochran and I'm Luke Emilie.
It was billed as a football game, but it turned into a track meet. And when the clock hit 0, the UCF Knights embarrassed the Owls, dropping Temple in front of a national audience.
The Owls made the trip to Orlando, Florida, looking to break a 6-game road losing streak dating all the way back to last season. Early in the first quarter, UCF on the field, it's quarterback John Rhys Plumlee scampering in for a 9-yard touchdown, his first of 3 rushing scores in the game. But Temple responds. E.J. Warner finds Jose Barbone for a 7-yard score. It was Barbone's first touchdown of the season, putting Temple ahead by 3 late in the opening quarter. Fast forward to the second quarter. The Knights go Wildcat. Isaiah Bowser runs it in from a yard out to extend the lead. Just 4 minutes later, Plumlee fires a dart to Kobe Hudson for a 25-yard touchdown. But the Knights' first half onslaught continued. Plumlee added another rushing score, this time to the near side. UCF scored 3 touchdowns in the final 6 minutes of the first half to lead 35-13 at halftime.
Now moving into the second half with the Knights up 35-13, Plumlee throws a screen pass to Ryan O'Keefe for an 11-yard touchdown to put the Knights up 42-13. After this, Temple went 3 and out and the ball was in the hands of the Knights once again. Here's another one. Plumlee throws a 68-yard bomb again to O'Keefe. This was the longest pass of the day. Coming in at a close second, Plumlee throws to Kobe Hudson for a 64-yarder. This was his second touchdown of the day. This play was the Knights' 3rd touchdown in their last 4 snaps. Now Thomas Castellanos takes the snap in the QB position right here, fakes the handoff and darts right through Leighton Jordan, trampling him to get into the end zone. It's like how Oprah says it, you get a touchdown and you get a touchdown. How about one more? Temple's defense could not stop freshman running back Jordan McDonald. This was his first career touchdown and the Knights' 7th in a row. UCF only punted once throughout the entire game. Temple loses bad, 70-13.
The second quarter is where things got away from Temple. The Knights scored 56 unanswered points in the final 3 quarters. Plumlee tallied 7 total touchdowns, which ties a UCF record. Kobe Hudson and Ryan O'Keefe each added over 100 receiving yards for the Knights. For the second straight game, E.J. Warner had a career high in pass attempts with 43. Jose Barbone racked up his 3rd game with 100-plus receiving yards this season in the loss.
You know, coaches, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror there. You know, they're supposed to do what we coach them to do. And, you know, if you kind of go off the results of what happened today, we didn't do a good enough job coaching these boys. You know, so that's something that we have to address as a coaching staff. We have to make sure that our players are holding themselves accountable for the things that they can control. And, you know, like all experiences, you know, win or lose, we have to grow and learn from this one as well. So,
I mean, I think it's just take it one day at a time. You know, I think kind of we needed this just to, it's kind of just like a smack in the mouth where you're like, you know what, you got to reset our jaw. We got to go back to work and, you know, just take it one day at a time.
Like, just players, like we're coached to do that in the game, like in practice, what we do in the game, but players like us, me, certain other players, everybody just messed up, you know. Everybody had MAs and we just got to fix that in practice.
And Emily, when I look at this game, the thing that keeps glaring out at me is the big plays that UCF was able to connect on time and time again. This is the first time we've seen the defense continue to get burned possession after possession. UCF had 11 plays of 20-plus yards in this game. They were flying down the field. 3 of them were for 60-plus, including the 2 touchdowns that you showed. We haven't seen the defense get torched like this yet, and for Temple's sake, you hope it's only this time, but the big plays decided this game. Stan Drayton said big plays can really flip an entire game, and to put it into context, Temple only had 2 plays of 20-plus yards. Those both came early in the first quarter.
And as the game went on, the defense just looked more and more burnt out as time went on. John Rice Plumlee just seemed to be too good for a Temple defense that we had a little bit of confidence in going into this game. He accounted for 7 total touchdowns, 3 rushing, 4 passing. He also threw for over 300 yards for the 4th time this season. And when you have really strong running backs and really great wide receivers you can easily connect with and a great offensive line to protect you, that's when it's going to get hard.
And listen, frankly, this was just an embarrassing loss. I mean, we saw some bad losses last season under Rod Kerry, and you bring in the new coaching staff, you bring in some new guys, you're trying to change the culture, and I think they're moving in the right direction, but this loss put them back in the wrong direction. You don't want to see losses of this magnitude. With this culture, you're expecting to at least compete in games. Temple had this game 14-13, and they gave up 56 unanswered points. That cannot happen. This is a culture that needs to do better than that. They need to compete in these games, and I'm sure it won't happen again under Stan Drayton.
And there were so many self-inflicted mistakes and just overall a lot of confusion on the field as well. Temple got several penalties for illegal substitutions, and Stan Drayton actually said that those were more of coaching issues. But at the same time, when you have those self-inflicted mistakes and you have those penalties just continuously pushing Temple further and further away from the end zone, they just weren't able to put up any more points after that first touchdown that they scored so early on. Now, Temple hasn't lost this bad since a 2005 matchup against Bowling Green of all teams, where the Falcons topped the Owls 70-7. Thursday night's defeat looked very similar. Inside the Nest reporter Jake Gable joins us live from Edberg Olson Hall to tell us about this historical loss. Hey, Jake.
Hey, Emily. Temple's loss Thursday night to UCF is one of the worst Temple's ever had. The last time they gave up more than 70 points was in 1977, when current defensive coordinator DJ Elliott was celebrating just his first birthday. UCF's offensive explosion was not only historic, but surprising as well.
Touchdowns, UCF.
Consider the game's over-under, set at 46 before game time. UCF scored 70 points on their own.
70-13. Absolutely emphatic.
Temple's defense ranked among the best in the country heading into this matchup. The Owls' third best pass defense dropped all the way to 29th thanks to this one game.
We just didn't do a good job containing the edge, and UCF did their job. They got outside of us.
The 70 points that Temple gave up to UCF is the most since 2005, when they gave up 70 as well to Bowling Green in a 63-point loss. Temple football has existed for 128 years. In that time, the Owls have played more than 1,100 games. The 57-point loss to the Knights is the 10th worst loss in program history.
It's all about the response, you know what I mean? So for us to sit back and look at the score from last week and harp on that and worry about if we're going to do that again, that's a losing mindset. A competitive mindset is let's wake up the next day and let's get better.
History tells us after Thursday's game, it can really only get better. The 70 points Temple gave up to UCF is tied for the 4th most allowed in a game in program history. The most points allowed happened before the forward pass was legalized in 1899, when Franklin and Marshall beat Temple 96-0. Temple also gave up 76 points to Pitt in 1977 and 71 to Delaware in 1957. More ugly numbers. The 70 points the Knights scored against the Owls is the 3rd most in the FBS this season. Only Ohio State with 77 and Western Kentucky with 73 scored more. I'm Jake Gable reporting live from outside the practice facility. Luke and Emily, back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Jake. Since this matchup was such a historical loss, Luke and I have to dig up some of UCF's biggest plays of the game where Temple allowed too many mistakes.
And I have one of those aforementioned big plays right here. We saw it in the highlights, a couple of 60-yard touchdowns. Here's the first one, a 68-yard bomb to O'Keefe. He makes Elijah Darraville miss, and he takes it in for the touchdown. So we're going to run it back here. This game is so out of reach at this point. But you look at this here. This is a theme of the entire night. John Rhys Plumlee, the UCF quarterback, is not being pressured at all. Temple ends up sending 6 as this play goes on. They get no pressure on Plumlee. He has all the time in the world to make the throw. And UCF is, Emilie, you alluded to it last week, they have a ton of speed. You can play it right here. This speed was on display. Plumlee steps up, launches down the field, and this is a hard tackle to make on anyone one-on-one, but especially Ryan O'Keefe. Elijah Darraville unable to make it. He walks into the end zone. This game was a blowout.
And this next game, 13 seconds left in the half. Plumlee rolls out to the right and avoids 3 Temple Owls to get straight into the end zone. This put the Knights up 3 possessions heading into the half. Now let's play one more time, but pause it right here. You can see Temple does a great job at locking down these receivers here on the right. But if you play it again, you can see Plumlee just makes Leighton Jordan miss this open field tackle and get straight into the end zone for another UCF touchdown. This was one of his 3 rushing touchdowns on the day.
And Emilie, you had the chance to see these 3 rushing touchdowns in person Thursday night.
I did get to see them. That's right, 8 members of the Spirit Squad traveled down to Florida for UCF's 6th annual Space Jam. I got a behind-the-scenes look at the Owls' pregame routine on the road from a cheerleader's perspective.
We are at Edberg Olson Hall getting ready to board the buses and head to the airport. Woo, woo, Go Owls! I don't think we do.
Felt like I was like, it was like a weekend now, so I didn't do anything.
But then I realized. So we're on our way to the UCF Stadium. It's about 4:30 right now, and kickoff isn't until 7, so we'll see you then.
We are super excited to be here on the road supporting Temple football. We have never been able to travel this far with the team.
It's really cool being able to travel to this away game. It's really cool seeing the behind the scenes of what the football team does every time they travel and experiencing the charter plane and staying in the hotel.
Space has been called.
Go Knights, and thank you so much for coming to tonight's game. Mission 6.
This was the first time in Spirit Squad history that the team traveled this far to a conference football game. So thank you, Athletics, for letting us tag along.
Looked like a trip you're never going to forget. And meanwhile, it's a trip Stan Drayton's probably trying to forget. We'll hear his thoughts on the loss and what lies ahead when Inside the Nest returns.
Hello and welcome back to Inside the Nest. After a 57-point loss to the Knights, Stan Drayton had a lot to say about the Owls' second conference game of the season in his weekly presser.
He discussed some pressing issues from the UCF loss, including run game issues, health concerns, and stopping the big plays. Check out the outfit. Stan Drayton's going all in on the fall vibes.
just talk about the journey. We got to move on from the UCF game as a football family and, and realize and respect the journey that we're on, and just knowing that there's going to be rough spots along the journey that's worth it, that's worth something, and, so we're going to take the positives from the game, excited about the way the offense is starting to trend. We need to be consistent along with what we're trending on right now, which is, growing with a young quarterback that seemed to be very decisive with the football. Offensive line, despite all the injuries, still not allowing a sack, ball carriers not allowing a turnover, and sustaining drives against a very good athletic football team in UCF. And, we got to build off the negatives, which were, just some poor tackling that was going on, a bunch of MAs that resulted in explosive plays. I just think that we got to make the plays when the plays present themselves. Obviously, we still need to continue to dissect what's going on in the run game. Again, with the offensive line, maybe we can settle in and find some ways to run against, get some consistency in the run game, But again, it's complementary football too, right? We always talk about that, and how do we get the ball in the end zone is what I'm, a little bit more concerned about. We got to score touchdowns, right? And I think, the better we are on special teams and providing good field position for an offense, being able to, play good defense to help us with the field position piece, all plays into the part of production on offense. It really does. So, the one thing about Plumlee that was special was his feet. He's got unbelievable athleticism. He scares you with his feet now. I mean, he really does. He threw the ball to very talented receivers when he had to. Obviously, a couple of shots that were wide open downfield that he connected on. But it was the real threat of the run. When you sit there and look at UCF being a top 5 rush team in the nation, you're going to see their quarterback being number 8, the number 8th rusher in the nation, leading up into our game. That's what he was. So we knew that we could not let that guy get loose. So I think Tulsa's quarterback is dynamic in the fact that he can throw on a dime, accurate passes with timing, and he can beat you that way. But the feat of Plumlee was pretty special. You're talking about a kid that was a 4'4" kid, played wide receiver. Not only does he tuck it and run it, but he knows exactly what he's doing when he's running the ball. You know what I mean? So it brings a little bit of a different threat to the table that way.
Now that was part 1 of Stan Drayton's presser, and what'd you take out of it?
So Stan Drayton went back to that UCF game and really highlighted John Rhys Plumlee and his feet. He said he was really strong on his feet in comparison to this Tulsa quarterback in Davis Brin. He said he's dynamic, but he's not as much of a threat on his feet as Plumlee is. So Temple is going to need to be aware of that, but nonetheless, they're going to need to, pressure this quarterback, pressure this entire offense, and pressure them to the point where they can't do anything with the ball. And we need to see bits and pieces of this Temple defense that we saw in games like Rutgers, in games like Memphis. That defense needs to be brought back to life for this Tulsa matchup.
And I liked how he talked about how all the phases of the game affect each other. The offense isn't just the only part struggling. We saw the defensive struggles last week, but special teams could improve too. He said special teams could improve the field position, defense could improve the field position. Everything affects each other. And then the other way, if the offense sustains drives, then the defense can get off the field more. It's all complementary football. You got to look at all 3 phases. It's not going to work if you look at just one phase. It's all 3, and when you lose by 57 points, it's definitely all 3. So now we'll move on to part 2 of the presser, where Drayton talks extensively about his freshman QB. He discusses his vision for the program's future, while also looking ahead to the Tulsa matchup.
There was a couple of throws that were, could have been better managed, a couple of decisions that could have been better managed here and there. But, I do like the way EJ is growing within the system. But we just got to be consistent around him a little bit more. But, again, it's not a sack issue. It's not a turnover issue. So it's, catching the 50-50 ball a higher percentage of the time. Getting more yards and staying on schedule on first down and on second down to get manageable third downs will help us. But in that game, UCF, you know, you lost the explosive play battle, which is the equalizer. Yeah, you know, I'm happy people are recognizing EJ for EJ. You know, EJ is his own person, and you know, from day one, you know, his family wanted EJ to be looked at as EJ, not Kurt Warner. You know, obviously he you know, it's great to grow up, you know, with a dad that's a legacy that way, but you know, EJ from day one wanted to make a name for himself, and I think the reason why he came to Temple is because that's what we were gonna do for him, is allow him to be himself, you know, and to grow and compete for the starting job. Now that he's earned that, EJ will tell you it's not about EJ. EJ will tell you it's about his football team. You know, we don't single each other out that way, you know, and we know that there's going to be individual success and accolades that happen for individuals, but I appreciate EJ because for EJ it's about Temple. It's about this football team, so we'll grow and go a long way with that mindset. You know, I'm enjoying it. You know, it's tough like I expected it. You know, it's rough in spots like I expected it. You know, I have we as a coaching staff have a phenomenal vision for this football team, and we have an obligation to protect this Temple culture of what has presented itself in the past from time to time. So we are excited about what we are enduring. We're learning about each other. We're learning about our kids, and we're learning that there's some good things that exist within this program. We got to go out and fill some voids. You know, from a recruiting standpoint, we got to get some guys in here. We got to continue to grow and develop the men that we have in our program, and we got to get healthy in spots. You know, but in spite of all of that, there's nobody making a bunch of excuses around here. You know, so that right there for me makes this. The journey, whether we're on the high or on the low, makes it all the while worth it. You know, I'm just excited to see what it's going to be in the near future here.
Now that was part 2 of Stan Drayton's presser. Luke, what did you take away from it?
I thought it was cool to just see him reflect on his time here. You know, 6 games down, 6 to go in his first season as Temple coach. And he admitted there are a lot of bumps and that he expected those, but he said he's got a phenomenal vision for the future. And he knows that a lot more of the success will come when a lot more of the new recruits come. We talked about it last week where he said during the bye he was going out and watching high school football games, and he's doing that again now. He's a guy that he recognizes it. He's a realist. He knows that the team's struggling right now, but it's going to get better if his plan and his players can be put in place going forward.
And you can't talk about the future of this Temple football team without talking about EJ Warner, and Stan Drayton had a lot to say about him in this presser. He said that he's continuing to grow throughout the system, and he said that he's really happy that people are finally noticing EJ for him and not for who his dad is. He also said that EJ wants to continue to improve and really make a name for himself here. He said he wants to make a name for himself here at Temple specifically because he's able to earn it here, he's able to be himself here, and he's able to play for himself here. So as long as he continues to grow in this space, he'll be able to be successful in conference play, especially if we're talking about the future of this Temple football team. Now, from one quarterback to the next, we'll get some great insight on Davis Brin and this Tulsa team when Luke and I bring in John Tranchina of the Tulsa World later in the show. John has only been covering Tulsa football for 1 year, but he's got lots of Golden Hurricane knowledge to spill, including the team's passing strengths and defensive weaknesses. Now, in addition to going behind enemy lines, we'll update you on the AAC standings as conference play is well underway.
We'll also go no huddle a little later in the show. Inside the Nest will be right back. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. We're halfway through the regular season, meaning that every team in the AAC has played a couple of conference games so far.
Now, some teams have played 4 conference games, others have played 2 or 3. Either way, the team at the top isn't Cincy or Houston. So, Luke, who has impressed you most so far this season?
The team that's impressed me the most is UCF. They have been the most complete team so far, and Temple isn't the only team that's run into the Knights' buzzsaw so far this season. All 5 of their wins have been by 17 plus, including a 22-point win over SMU. We all saw the offense on Thursday night, but they've now allowed 20 or less points in all 6 games this season. Tulane and Cincinnati are ranked, and I think the Knights are coming up right behind them. UCF is a well-rounded team that's playing their best football right now.
And for me, it's got to be Tulane. Fresh off a 45-31 road victory at South Florida on Saturday, the Green Wave found itself ranked 25th in both the Associated Press and the coaches' polls. This team is in the national rankings for the first time since 1998, when the Green Wave went undefeated for 12 games. All of a sudden, they are back to that same form and are currently undefeated in conference play, checking off wins against USF, ECU, and Houston. That win against Houston was 27-24 in overtime.
Well, now speaking of Houston, they're the team that was projected to win the conference at the start of the season. They're struggling. They lost in overtime to Tulane, as you mentioned, and barely beat Memphis with a remarkable fourth quarter comeback. I think it's fair to say their road to first place is an uphill climb.
And you actually called that right from the beginning. Houston is not the same team we saw last season, but SMU is also a team that usually sits closer to the top and is currently only ranked 8th in conference play right now. The Mustangs lost bad to UCF and only beat Navy by 6 points in their last matchup.
Now, there's no first place talk in Temple's matchup with Tulsa this week. All the conversation is about these teams searching for their first conference win. Tulsa is a team that's played better than its record shows. The Golden Hurricane is 11th in the country in passing offense and 6th in pass defense. On offense, they ride the back of quarterback Davis Brent. The redshirt senior has thrown for over 300 yards per game, has a 60% completion percentage, and has a 14-5 touchdown to interception ratio. They've played 2 ranked teams in Ole Miss and Cincinnati close, losing each game by 10 points or less. But the Golden Hurricane is coming off a 30-point loss to Navy, the most recent game in a 3-game losing streak.
Now, we can scout this Tulsa team all we want, but sometimes it's nice to have an expert give us some insight.
We spoke with John Tranchina of the Tulsa World to get an insider look at the ins and outs of the Golden Hurricane in this week's edition of Behind Enemy Lines.
I think it's going to be a lot closer game than we saw last year. With a few factors here and there, probably, turnovers being key determining factor on who comes out on top.
The Golden Hurricane are 11th in the nation in passing yards per game at just under 330. Do you think that can be sustained against the Temple defense that's allowing under 200 passing yards per game?
I think so, because they've done well against some strong defenses already. They've had a pretty good day against Cincinnati, at least passing wise. When Davis Brent is healthy and on his game, he's got one of the nation's top receivers in Keelan Stokes. That passing game is going to be really good.
And in last year's matchup, Tulsa won by a score of 44-10. Is there anything different you've seen from this Temple team so far that was missing last season?
Well, I think, Luke, you kind of just said it. I think the Temple defense is a lot better now. So, my guess is that will be a key to it. It'll make it a lot closer. I think that the Temple offense also looks better than it did last year, probably.
Now for Tulsa, you see a 2-4 team, and sometimes when you see a record like that, you think they must be struggling in all aspects, but really they're putting up really impressive offensive numbers. Why hasn't the team been able to string together more wins than they have so far?
Yeah, that's what people here would like to know too. They're basically they let one slip away in the opener that they should have won. They let a 10-point lead, fourth quarter lead slip away, and they lost that opening game to Wyoming in overtime. They also had opportunities to beat Ole Miss. What kind of team are we going to see this week is kind of the question here is, are we going to see the team that played Ole Miss close, or are we going to see the team that could not stop Navy's running game at all?
So Keelan Stokes seems to be one key to success for this Tulsa offense. What stands out about him in the wideout position?
He's got incredible speed. Makes great moves to shake off defenders when he gets the ball. He's good across the middle to get some short yardage gains, and he's great just burn the speed down the sideline, and he can do kind of any aspect of the wide receiver position. He's had a great year.
And do you have a specific game score prediction heading into this conference matchup?
I'm going to go with, no offense to you guys, but I'm going to go with Tulsa kind of bouncing back and having a big game and going, say 31. It's going to be close though, 31-24.
Now, a lot of strong passing performances and wide receiver standouts on the Golden Hurricane side, but now it's time to check out what Temple's tools are heading into week 3 of AAC play.
Now, I don't even think the Owls peeked at our toolbox last week, so Emily, why don't you start us off with a big one to try and get their attention?
All right, well, let's hope they take a peek this week. Tool number 1 is to make those open field tackles. UCF made the first guy miss on way too many plays last week. Remember in the beginning of the season when I said Temple's defense looked slow? Well, compared to this fast UCF offense, the D-backs are starting to match their pre-conference form. Even top guys like Jordan McGee were missing wide open tackles in the backfield. It just can't happen, especially against these top AAC teams.
Tool number 2 is to shut down the Tulsa pass game. This is easily the strength of the Golden Hurricane offense. Tulsa averages the 11th most passing yards in the country, and they're going against a Temple defense that just allowed over 400 air yards to UCF. But even with that big game, the Temple defense is still allowing under 200 passing yards per game. If the Owls can find that early season defensive magic, they'll hang in this game.
Tool number 3 is E.J. Warner and his receivers need to communicate better. The chemistry on the offensive side of the ball was way off last week, and the timing wasn't there on multiple throws by Warner. The wide receivers were either running the wrong routes or Warner was getting throws out way too early. Plus, I know this position is relatively new for guys like DeJuan Mathis, but he needs to continue to adapt and make fewer mistakes at that wideout position moving forward.
And my final tool is for Temple to bring the energy. Now, it sounds simple, but anytime a team loses by 57 points, it's easy to check out mentally. Now, Stan Drayton said the game getting out of hand last week was more due to missed assignments and not to a lack of effort. If he's right, the effort should be evident from the jump against Tulsa, an opponent the Owls have a much better chance against than they did against the Knights.
Now, 4 tools for week 3 of conference play on October 21st. We'll see if the Owls put these tools to use for their first night game at the Link this season. Kickoff starts at 7:30, and if you can't make it, you can watch at home on ESPN+. But as always, don't forget to check out our updates on Twitter at @OwlSportsUpdate. Break time. When we come back, we'll give some insight on where the Owls might finish in AAC play and break down some Tulsa weaknesses during our favorite segment.
We'll go no huddle when Inside the Nest returns. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. On the field, we haven't seen many late game no huddle situations for the Owls this season, but here in the studio, we like to make it a weekly thing.
It's time to answer some key questions on this week's edition of No Huddle.
All right, first question. What is the weakness of Tulsa that the Owls should look to attack?
So we mentioned it a little earlier, but Davis Brin is not a running quarterback like John Rhys Plumlee. Temple's defense is stronger attacking up front and pressuring quarterbacks before they get the ball out. It was obvious that Plumlee's legs were a shock to Temple's defense, so it will likely be easier for the Owls to pressure this Tulsa QB right after the snap.
Now on offense, the Owls need to run the air out of the football. We've discussed Temple's run game struggles a lot this season, but Tulsa is bottom 3 in the country in stopping the run. If there's ever a time for Temple to figure out the ground game, it's Friday night.
Now question 2, after a couple of conference games, where do you see Temple finishing in conference play this season?
I've got them finishing 9th out of 11 teams in this conference. The game against UCF showed me that the Owls can't hang with the teams at the top of the conference. Head-to-head matchups with USF, Navy, and Tulsa will ultimately decide the bottom of the conference, and I'm confident in the Owls. I think they win 2 out of those 3 and work their way out of the basement in the AAC.
Now I agree, but I'm bumping them up a spot. I've got the Owls finishing 8th out of the 11 teams. Temple has only faced higher-ranked conference opponents so far, but I think the Owls can be competitive against teams like Tulsa, South Florida, Navy, and maybe even Houston with the sloppy football we've seen from them so far this season. So here's a quick look at our score predictions from last week. Luke, Sam, and Jake are tied up at 6-0, while my record sits at 5-1.
I have a hunch that this will be the week that we shake up that scoreboard and see some different thoughts on Friday's outcome.
It's week 3 of conference play for the Owls, and we have new score predictions from our crew of 4. Luke, what's your take?
Emilie, for the first time in 4 weeks, I'm going with Temple 24-21. The pass defense against UCF was an outlier for the Owls, and they'll continue to be an elite unit against the pass going forward. The offense will muster off enough points to win against a Golden Hurricane defense that allows over 35 points per game.
You're brave for that one, Luke. After that Central Florida loss, I have to play it safe and pick Tulsa winning 28-17. The team is ranked 11th in the nation in passing yards per game, and they have a solid overall offense. With the way Temple's defense let up last week, I'm not sure they can bounce back for this one at home. Sam, how about you?
I'm going to have to go with the underdogs this weekend. I'm taking Temple 24-17. With the Tulsa having a bottom of the conference defense, I think it'll give the offense a little push to get going, especially since they tend to perform better when at home at the Link. I have some faith in the team that it learned from the brutal loss last week and will turn that into a win.
I have to go with Tulsa in this one, 28-20. The Owls are 0-2 in conference play so far and have been outscored 94-16 in those two games. I think the defense will be able to bounce back, but I just don't have faith in this offense just yet, since they've only been able to get successful short spurts and haven't been able to put together a full game's work.
We're up against our final break of the day. When we come back, we'll look at where some former coaches on North Broad find themselves in 2022. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. We've seen a lot of movement with some former Temple head coaches over the last couple weeks.
We now turn it over to Inside the Nest reporter Sam Massad to tell us more about where they are now. Hey, Sam.
Thanks, guys. With all the recent coaching news, we're taking a trip down memory lane to see where these former Owl head coaches are today. Going in chronological order, we're starting all the way back to 2006 when the Owls were under coach Al Golden. He ended his Temple career with a 27-34 record in 2010. After a few years in Miami, he found himself in the NFL, working with both the Detroit Lions and Cincinnati Bengals. Currently, he is back in the NCAA, working as a defensive coordinator in Notre Dame. Coach Steve Adazio then picked it up for the Owls for the 2011-2012 seasons. This short time with Temple was a mixed one with a record that was a shade above 500. He moved on to Boston College for a couple years, then took on the head coach job at Colorado State, but was later let go in 2021 after a 4-12 career record. Currently, he is the Texas A&M O-line coach. Moving on to Adazio's successor, Matt Rule took over Temple back in 2013, elevating the program to a higher level. This includes a 10-2 season in 2016, where he led the Owls to take down his alma mater, Penn State, 27-10, then ended the season with an AAC championship title. Rule was most recently ended up with the Carolina Panthers from 2020 up until last week, when he was fired as head coach, holding an 11-27 record. Once Rule moved to Baylor in 2017, Jeff Collins took on his first head coaching job with Temple. Collins led the Owls to 2 successful seasons, 2 bowls, and surpassed Adazio as Temple's winningest coach in just 2 seasons of work. He then left Temple for Georgia Tech, but he was fired last month after 3+ losing seasons. And to finish it off with a name we haven't heard here since last November, Rod Kerry, who coached the Owls starting in 2019. He was let go by Arthur Johnson after a disappointing 2020 and 2021 seasons. He is now with Indiana and was moved to an offensive line coach within the past week. A lot of movement with a couple of coaches getting fired over the last few weeks. And as you can see, coaches who had some success at Temple ended up having mixed success at best once leaving North Broad. Reporting from the studio set, I'm Sam Massad. Back to you guys on desk.
Thank you, Sam. Now you can follow along with all of our coverage of this week's game on Owl Sports Update on Twitter for live updates under the Friday Night Lights against Tulsa.
That'll do it for us today. He's Luke Emilie. I'm Emilie Cochran. Have a safe week. We'll see you again Thursday with our next edition of Owl Sports Update.